Welcome back, everybody. This is your boy Mark, and this is part 4 of our Ultimate Tiermaker Challenge. As I mentioned towards the end of the last video, there is now a playlist that has every last one of the Tiermaker videos on there. So if you're new to the channel or new to this series, go ahead and click on the playlist and watch them in order so that way this makes sense. As always, guys, I do appreciate your support in this. And if you would like to see more content like this, please don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, hit that notification bell too, and share with all your friends. With that out of the way, let's get started. All right, let's remain true to tradition and take a quick recap of where we left off last time. All right, and that leads us to a very painful F tier ranking where we laid to rest Witchfinder General for being one of the most unknown and underloved band of the new wave of British heavy metal movement in the 1980s. So, let's take a quick look at who our first band of the day is, and it is none other than Within Temptation. And if you guys have paid any attention to me at all in the past 3 videos, you'll know exactly where they're going. They're going straight to the S tier for being a revolutionary figure in metal around the late 90s, early 2000s, along with Nightwish. They created this subculture of female-fronted symphonic epic power metal. And without either one of those bands creating the movement, there would not be Epica or any of the other bands that followed. So for creating a whole new revolution and creating a voice for women in Scandinavian metal, you don't get any bigger or any better than Nightwish and Within Temptation. And it looks like we're going to keep the S train rolling for right now with Darkthrone. Guys, these deserve nothing less than an S tier ranking because before there was a 90s black metal revolution that we all know about, very well documented, there was a band named Darkthrone that was inspired by Bathory, whom we've already talked about, and Celtic Frost, also whom we've talked about. And they've created the sound of what was going to be modern black metal in the 90s. These guys are heavily influential. They're what sparked the movement that created Immortal, Emperor, Burzum, Mayhem, and so many others. This band was iconic to the sound of what was going to be the Norway wave of 90s black metal. That is incredibly iconic. It wouldn't have happened without them, and it wouldn't have happened without Bathory. And for a band that is no longer around and has never played live, people are continually discovering their body of work. They're incredibly influential and significant, and the sum of their parts, especially Fenris, is a well-known and well-heard-about character in the metal community. These guys can't be replaced. You want to talk about starting a revolution? We start it with Darkthrone. S tier. All right, and what is this? Ephemerer? Yeah, that sounds a whole lot like No Context. I'm keeping the tab open because I think I'm going to need it again. Alright. In theory, again, I don't know anything about them. They're new to me because I've never heard them before the list. Angel Maker. Guys, I need your help as this category is continuing to grow. If you guys have any sort of information on where I can possibly place them based on fact and relevance, please don't forget to add that down in the comments. I love hearing from you guys anyway. If anybody knows anything about these bands, I would like to know so I can update this list in a later video where I can map these guys according to where they truly belong in the spectrum of heavy metal. Alright, the next band is a current and semi-relevant band. This is As Blood Runs Black. This is a... Let me get that off the screen. This is a deathcore, sort of metalcore band. I think they're from Philadelphia. I'm not sure. But they are from the U.S. They're signed to Metal Blade Records. These guys are a newer band. They have a few releases under their belt. They're not incredibly mainstream yet, but they're getting there. As far as significance and being an influential band, these guys right now are consistent, they're respected, and the general response from both the critics and fans alike are generally warm and positive, saying, you know, consistently good music. Are they revolutionary in any way? No. Are they consistent and respected? Yes. Which lands them at a D tier rating. This is one of the bands we're probably going to need to keep an eye on, because I feel like in the next couple of years, these guys are going to explode in relevance just from the way things are trending. But until then, they are respected, they're consistent, yes, that's not a bad thing. But remember, the whole basis of this list is on cultural significance, influence, and availability and accessibility. They have availability and accessibility, but they weren't revolutionary. But they are respected and dependable, and we need them. All right, autopsy. This is a hard one to place because honestly, their significance to death metal is massive. They were formed in 1983, and one of their members was previously in Death, who is probably the most iconic death metal band of all time. Death and Autopsy are about around the same time period. That being said, a lot of people credit Autopsy for actually originating the sound of what was going to be American death metal. I feel like they created the momentum, but the other bands kind of carried it. They're a vehicle to greatness. But this wouldn't have happened if we didn't have all those early death metal bands. A lot of bands have taken influence from them, but when you compare it up to the likes of Death or Cynic or, a lot of their contemporaries at the time, you don't hear about Autopsy in, the same kind of circles. These guys have a lot less relevance. They do have a massive cultural impact on death metal, but it's definitely outshined by Death. And for that, I feel like that limits their influence, but they are important. So in all fairness, I can't give them any less than an A, but I also don't think it's fair for them to be S tier. They had an impact, but the impact wasn't as largely felt as what was yet to come. All right, let's see here. What is this? Guys, y'all really need to work on your logos. I'd like to be able to read them. Beherit. Well, they're going to beherit the no context category because I don't know anything about them. Belphegor. Okay. Belphegor is an Austrian melodic blackened death metal band. I think they formed in 1993. These guys are very well respected in the metal community. But whenever you look at influence, availability, and accessibility, that's what kind of hurts these guys. Kind of like a situation with As Blood Runs Black. They're consistent, they're dependable, they have a history over 25 years in the making. Definitely one of the more notable figures in the black and death metal movement. That being said, they didn't really revolutionize anything, and it seems like their audience is extremely limited, especially here in America. So that kind of weighs down their tier ranking, but I will say they're definitely on the same list as Blood Runs Black and a couple of the others from that movement. Again, not revolutionary, but you don't have to be. Dependable and trustworthy, and having a legacy that spans 25 years is something that has to be noted as well. That being said, Belphegor is a D tier. All right, and this is... what is that, actually? Be'lakor. Yeah, y'all gonna have to help me out with that one. That no context is really growing. Alright, so Blasphemy. This is a black metal band formed around 1984 in Canada. These guys are known in very small circles. They're a very hard band to find information on. It seems like they're very limited. If you look at their Facebook, they don't have very many followers there. Their Last.fm and Spotify are kind of scarce. It just seems like they are a subcultural type of black metal movement. If you really are a fan of this band, then you really have to do your homework in the black metal category. These guys just never really got a whole lot of love or even a whole lot of respect or even mentioned. They didn't really get a lot of support. So for that being said, these guys go straight to F tier. Again, it's not that they're a bad band. It's just that, like Witchfinder General, there was no support. And really, they're so obscure. They're very obscure. It's hard to find anything on their music. It's very hard to find anything on their history. And honestly, most of what I found on them is from their Bandcamp. And when you have a Bandcamp page and that's what you're relying on, along with some of these other sites that I'm cross-referencing, that means you're really small. Nothing wrong with Bandcamp. I was on it years ago. But that being said, that kind of continues your audience in a more niche direction. So, F tier for Blasphemy. But then again, it's black metal from Canada. Gotta respect it. Bloodywood. I can read that one, but I don't know anything about them. I haven't heard of them before today. Alright, so this actually does not belong in the metal category, and that's Cell Dweller. He's actually not even... this isn't even a band. This is a producer that I feel like, if I read it correctly, does more for like industrial, like electronic music. I mean, he does cross over into metal territory, but this dude's palette is so extensive it doesn't really even belong here. Not only that, it's just not a band. Why is he here? No disrespect, but this is for metal bands. This is a Mexican death metal band. Simicon? Again, very niche. Very underpromoted. I've never even heard of them before today, but after some research, they are like a folk/death metal band from Mexico. But that being said, it's very hard to find accessibility and availability when it comes to their music. Their audience seems to be rather small. So when it comes to impact, I feel like they're really at the bottom of the tier. Doesn't seem like they're getting a whole lot of support to help promote their significance or even their sound. I'm going to have to give them an F tier for just being really unknown. Alright. This is Coroner. This is an 80s speed/thrash metal band from Switzerland. Swiss metal, right? And honestly, for a really unknown band, they have a killer name and a killer logo. Probably one of the best logos in the business, to be honest with you. They do have a legacy that spans back many years. That being said, availability of music, accessibility of music is really slim. Not a lot is known about this band. Relevance seems to be really low. I don't even think they're active anymore. I might be wrong on that, but I don't think they are. As far as audience, it just seems to be real underground, under the radar. These guys kind of flew straight under the radar, really. No one talks about them, really. The circles that you find them in are really small. Again, it's another Witchfinder General situation. These guys are an F-tier band. Again, don't think of it as this band sucks. It's just these guys never had a chance or any support to make a huge impact. It's unfortunate, but this happens to so many bands. And it happens in every genre and subgenre of music. Alright. Well, we're going to keep the F train rolling for a little bit. This is Crypt Sermon. This is doom metal. I want to say from Canada as well. These guys are a newer band, and honestly, they are relatively unknown. Their social medias are small. These guys are active. They're trying to make a name for themselves. But when it comes down to it, these guys are as under the radar as it gets. Hopefully in time, they will find the means to promote themselves and get their word out a little bit better. But as of right now, these guys cannot, keep their voice out enough to make an impact. But hopefully in time that'll change. But for right now, these guys are an F. Alright, I like this next band. This is Death Angel, another thrash band from California. These guys came on scene, I think, a little late. This is one of the late 80s thrash bands. Now, that being said, they're iconic. They are legends in the metal community. One of the most consistent bands, even though they did have a time where they were not together. When they came back, everybody heard about it. Marc Osegeda being one of the highly revered vocalists in the thrash genre, as well as Rob Cavastani being an incredible guitar player. That man can shred. His tone is impeccable. And relative newcomer Ted Aguilar being a massive icon, great rhythm guitar player. This band is actually more significant now than they were back into the 80s and 90s. Again, that mid-2000s, that 2009 to 2014 resurgence of old school bands. Death Angel was one of those that rode that wave and got a second career out of it. Now, that being said, even with their new heightened popularity, they still have managed to maintain somewhat of a medium standing in the metal community. I honestly can't place these guys in the same bracket as Overkill and Exodus, because those guys have actually reached further and have more solid influence. These guys are an incredible band. I think they're incredibly underrated, especially for the history and career that they've had. I love these guys, but they really didn't get much love from the metal community, and that's unfortunate because these guys have some serious talent. But for that reason alone, I have to give them a D tier rating. It's painful for me because in my mind, they need to be up higher on the list. But reality is they got overshadowed, and even in the second wave of their career, which is right now, you've got other people that are just killing it a little bit harder and are more significant. It's not fair, but it is factually accurate. All right. What is this? Devourment. They're going to be eating it up in no context because I've got nothing on these guys. All right. So, the next one does not really need an explanation. This is Dio. One of the most undisputed legends of the metal community. These guys are just... Dio is just a legend. Ronnie James Dio is just a legend. I'm going to be completely honest with you. His legacy as a person and his legacy as a musician has far exceeded, all boundaries of time and musicality. When he died, the whole world really seemed to stop turning. And when musicians die, sometimes it's only important to a subculture of music. It didn't matter what kind of heavy metal you liked. When Ronnie James Dio passed away, everybody cried. Myself included. I did shed a couple tears for Ronnie because his music pulled me out of some dark places. I'm not really a kind of guy that cries a lot over things, but I felt like I got to know him through his music. His music has got a special place in my heart. He's a very big influence on my playing musically. But when the whole world stops turning for one man, his legacy cannot be denied. His music is still massively popular, and he's influenced so many people over the past, 40 years or so. And the Dio train just doesn't stop rolling. He's one of those guys that even after his death, he still lives on. And honestly, after his death, it just seems like nothing has been the same. Music definitely has not been the same since Ronnie passed. There aren't many artists that I can honestly say have that kind of impact. The only other one for me personally that had the similar impact was Lemmy Kilmister. Because one of my favorite things to do was keep an eye on the new Motorhead records so I could get them as soon as they came out. And there's not going to be another one. And honestly, music just doesn't feel right not having Motorhead. Music doesn't feel right anymore. It's not the same. But that being said, he is an S tier. He's S++++. No explanations needed. I mean, you know metal, then you'll know Dio. Straight up. Alright, enough of the emotional stuff. Let's get back to the metal. And this is Dissection. I want to say these guys are Swedish. Yeah. These guys are Swedish death metal. Technical, melodic death metal. Even though these guys didn't quite make it as big as the fabled Gothenburg Trio, these guys are actually considered one of the main forces behind the Gothenburg Trio. But because of what was happening in the 90s, they kind of got snowed underneath At the Gates and other bands of the time. But these guys had a really big importance in the sound and shaping of the entire melodic Swedish metal movement. So for that, I have to give them an A. And also, you just don't hear about these guys in the same circle, in the same context They don't hold, I mean, it might not be fair, but again, people get snowed in the music industry. That's what happens when a wave comes out. They're going to be your champions, and there's going to be people just right below. And these guys created a sound as well as the rest of the bands. And a lot of people credit Dissection for actually starting that Gothenburg movement. That being said, you just don't hear about them in the same sort of significance. Even now, they're not nearly as significant as the other bands from the movement. That being said, they are massively influential, and for that, and also starting a musical revolution, you can't give them any less than an A. Enforcer. These guys are going straight to F tier. I believe Enforcer is a Swedish melodic metal band that combines influences of techno, hip hop, and R&B. You really don't hear about these guys that often. I think they are starting to form some popularity, but for the most part, they kind of hover below the radar, so they are getting an F tier rating. I really thought this next band was dead. It says Il Nino. You want to talk about one of the more revolutionary and prolific bands of the nu metal movement towards the end of the 90s, into the 2000s. It doesn't get any more unique or diverse than Il Nino. This is a Latin American / American heavy metal band. They take their cultural influences as well as influences from R&B and hip hop, and combine them with that nu metal sound. And they're still massively relevant today, which is weird because I haven't heard anything about this band since like the mid-2000s. Probably around 2008, 2009 was when I stopped hearing about them, and I have not heard about them since. But judging from the research that I've done today and just looking at things, these guys are massively popular. They hold great cultural significance. They're very different. I feel like they are revolutionary for the time. But when you compare them to their contemporaries that came out around the same time, they do not reach the same amount of influence. But I will say, because of what they have done for metal, they do deserve an A. I'm not even sure why this is on the list here. This next one is very obscure. Now, I will say I do hear about them from time to time. And honestly, this band no longer exists. This is American black metal, which is really basically a solo project for one dude in Illinois. And these guys are very cult. They're very... their audience is really small to almost microscopic. It's hard to find anything as far as musical releases by them. It seems like they were active until about 2020. I do believe it's 2020. But I don't believe they are making any music now. That being said, even with the documentation, which is scarce on the band, I referenced Wikipedia, I've looked at Last.fm, I've looked at Spotify, I found their Facebook page, and God, everything is pretty much scarce, which means it's a cult following thing. Black metal is very popular, and I think people are going further into the depths of black metal to find the most cult band, because that's kind of trendy nowadays. And these guys are one of those bands that are being discovered, but at the same time, when I say microscopic circles, I mean you really have to examine. And I've spent several minutes trying to gather some sort of intel on this band, and it's not there. These guys were small when they came out, and it seems like over time, they've just become more and more obscure. So that being said, these guys are deserving of an F tier rating. Again, I'm not saying they suck, but this band has microscopic significance and zero influence. The next band on the list is a surprising one for me. This is Kitty. This is a all-female nu metal band from Canada. Honestly, I heard about them when I was in high school. If you were a goth chick, basically, then you liked Kitty. It was trendy. And honestly, after I graduated high school, I think maybe a year or two after, about 2008 is when I stopped hearing about them. that being said, doing research today on the band, they're actually more relevant than I ever gave them credit for. Even though you don't hear about them like that. At least I don't. I want to say 2008 is literally the last time I heard anything about them. And that being said, these ladies are credited for creating a more acceptable, culturally acceptable female-fronted metal genre. They did a lot in the late 90s into the early 2000s. That's where the base of their framework is on. They're fairly available and accessible, but as far as bands and people they've influenced, I find that those numbers are kind of small. However, pop culture and significance, these guys are actually still incredibly popular. I didn't know that. And, one of the big things when you're looking at their repertoire and their legacy, the one thing that you do keep coming up with is the fact of what they've done for female-fronted heavy metal. And for that, I'm giving them a D tier rating. Did they invent... Oh, that's the wrong one. Did they invent female-fronted heavy metal? No, God, no. We had that going on in the earlier 90s, and maybe even before then. But that being said, they were revolutionary for a short period of time. People are still actually very much out there for them. They have a very loyal fan base. I will tell you that. But that being said, they just honestly didn't get a lot of love consistently. And that's the other thing. They're not a super consistent band. So they're here and they're not. They have broken up, I think, a couple times. Their releases also have not been consistently good either, from what I can tell. However, they are consistently considered a decent and dependable band and a very well-respected band. So give it up for Kitty. They are a very respected and important D-tier band. Okay, if I can get my mouse to work. This next one is Majestica. This is a smaller power metal kind of side project for ex-Sabaton guitarist Tommy Johansson. That being said, I think the original iteration of this band was Rainseed, I think that's how it is. That's how it's spelled. Now it's Majestica. That being said, there's really, honestly, no consistent legacy to this band. So I'm giving them an F tier rating. I'm not saying they're terrible because I love Tommy Johansson's work. I think he's an incredibly talented vocalist and guitar player. I see nothing wrong with this band. It's just they're not really making waves and they're not really revolutionary or impactful or even culturally significant. All right, what is this? This looks illegible. Nargaroth. That sounds like no context to me, but that also sounds very black metal. Maybe it is. I don't know. Mental Cruelty. I never heard of them, but I can tell you that this list is a big case of mental cruelty. I'm losing my mind over here. Again, why did I sign up for this? Oh yeah, because I wanted to. Not smart. All right, carrying on. This is a all-female extreme metal group from Sao Paulo, Brazil. This is Nervosa. These guys are really a band on the rise. You hear about them a lot. I actually started hearing about them about a year ago. And towards the end of last year, their new bassist, Hellpire, got an endorsement with Dean Guitars, which is really significant for them. However, that being said, I do feel like they're having some issues getting support to establish a larger audience. However, that being said, their following is significant. They're a band on the rise. And I feel like they're doing a lot for a young female-fronted extreme metal band. All reviews seem to be generally positive, and that's from critics and fans alike. I just feel like in time, they're going to get the support they need to grow out and reach a bigger audience. But since these guys are really creating a big buzz in a short period of time, the music is extremely available. I feel like in the next year or two, these young ladies are going to be on top of the world. But for right now, I'm giving them a D. I feel like in recent times they've come up so much that they don't deserve an F tier rating, because even with the struggles that they're facing, getting the support they need to be the band they want to be, their music and their body of work, even though it's small, is creating so much of a buzz that everybody in the metal world is hearing about them, and they're becoming unavoidable. So I feel like these ladies have a lot of talent, and I feel like they've got the potential to be big, so they are a band to watch. Are they revolutionary? I don't know yet. I feel like they could be, though. So we're going to keep them at a D tier and keep our eyes on them, because I guarantee you they're not going away. I feel like they are only going to get bigger from here. Mark my words. All right, Nile. Honestly, I want to put these guys, this might be a sore subject, I don't know, but I feel like they've earned an S tier rating. These guys are doing something that is honestly completely different than any other, honestly, black and death metal or even death metal band on the face of the planet. They took death metal and made it themed around Egyptian and Middle Eastern cultural themes. And it plays a big part in their lyrical context. It plays a big part in their musical phrasing. These guys are modern legends. I mean, they're not going anywhere, and it seems like in time they're only getting more significant and more relevant. I think they've done something very revolutionary, and it seems like they have done something very revolutionary in the death metal world. These guys are giants. They're huge. Honestly, I put them up there with Cannibal Corpse. They're about on the same tier of significance as them, believe it or not. They're Dallas Toller Wade. I'm losing my words, but bear with me. Dallas Toller Wade, Carl Sanders, and I believe George Callias, one of the most legendary drummers of metal, also played in the band. And these guys are household names in the metal community. They're top tier as far as death metal is concerned. They're unavoidable, and they're making big tours, and their shows are consistently big. And honestly, I haven't heard much bad about them, and that spans their entire career. Even with lineup changes and whatnot, these guys are consistently dependable, available, relevant, significant, and influential. You don't hear much hate about these guys, and that's uncommon in the metal world. But I feel like they've earned their place as legends in the death metal community. I mean, you can't not. They've contributed something entirely unique to the death metal genre. Nuclear Assault. I think I'm going to get assaulted for this ranking. Nuclear Assault is a band that was founded by former Anthrax bassist Dan Lilker. These guys are talked about. They came out towards the mid to late 80s. Similar period of time as Overkill. But honestly, all these other bands got so much love and attention. Again, you had the Big Four, which is taking up everyone's headspace in that genre. You couldn't outdo them. And then you had Exodus and Overkill, and you had Testament. All in the early to mid-late 80s, you had all these bands coming out. And then right underneath, you had Nuclear Assault and Death Angel. Death Angel's a little bit towards the later end of the 80s, but still, even Death Angel got more notoriety. These guys went really under the radar. They were significant, like local significance. There you go. That's a good way to put it. These guys were huge in different areas. You heard about them a lot, and it was generally good when you did. But then you didn't hear about them. It seems like they never hammered down a consistent audience. I feel like they're mainly noted here in the United States. I mean, I'm sure they have an audience overseas, but the band did not appear to be extremely consistent, and they were never extremely relevant. And when the band decided to go their separate ways, it didn't seem like anybody really shed much of a tear over them, honestly. It seemed like, comments on the thread were like, this was going to happen. We knew this was going to happen. And honestly, it seems like the ones that were affected the most by their absence were the hardcore fans that were there since the beginning. Again, that's a local significant sort of thing. I think they're marginally influential, but I don't think they got enough attention and support to really forge any massive relevance. They've just always kind of been against the grain, under the radar, just a locally significant band. And for that, I give them an F tier ranking. Now, don't get me wrong, these guys are legends in the metal community, especially within the thrash subculture. But when you come down to it, these guys never really had a chance. They were never really given the time of day to become greater than they were. And it sucks. This does happen, again, to a lot of bands. You have top tier talent, but honestly, the media and the record companies are so obsessed with the other bands that are taking precedence that a lot of really good talent and a lot of really good bands just kind of float away. Nuclear Assault is one of those bands. All right. Pain. This is weird stuff right here. Now, don't get me wrong. Peter Tägtgren is a legend, especially in Sweden, but universally for industrial and crossover metal, stuff like that. You know, I would say he was kind of like Sweden's Rammstein almost. Very popular. He has a very large career that spans over well over 2 decades. That being said, his ventures were never consistently successful in America. You hear about them and then you don't. You hear about them and it's good. And then you hear about them and it's crap. You know, overall, there's just a general sense of weirdness about his styles of music, whether if it's Pain or Hypocrisy. I think Hypocrisy kind of had a little bit more of a foothold here and generally more positive reviews. But, you know, Pain did a lot for industrial metal. They had a lot of techno and EDM sort of stuff going on with it. That being said, availability, accessibility, and consistency. Consistency was never something this band had, especially not here in America. I feel like these guys are more locally significant, and honestly, they're not very noteworthy in the grand scheme of things. They're popular. They're mainstream. I would say marginally. But honestly, I don't feel like they contributed enough consistently to heavy metal to really be anything over an F, because honestly, you don't hear about them. They're as under the radar as they get, and I feel like a lot of that's due to local significance, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they were just never really consistently well received. So F tier ranking for Pain, and that hurts. All right, the next band is really not a metal band, but I'm allowing them because their contributions revolutionized heavy metal, and that is Rainbow. Yes, it was another band. When Ritchie Blackmore left Deep Purple, he formed a more hard rock band that included Ronnie James Dio. He was the original singer and widely regarded as the best singer for Rainbow. You had the amazing Cozy Powell on drums again, and then also you had some of Dio's Elf bandmates, Gary Driscoll, Mickey Lee Soul, Craig Gruber, and they kind of got replaced by other musicians over time. This was actually Ronnie James Dio's very first successful band, and then he moved on to Black Sabbath, where he gained further notoriety. Then he got a solo career after that. That was absolutely legendary. That being said, if you didn't have Rainbow, you wouldn't have power metal, period. They are the archetypical band that created the roots of a very marketable and very popular and passionate subculture of metal. You know, songs like Stargazer, Man on the Silver Mountain, Long Live Rock and Roll. These guys are huge staples within the metal community. Their body of work, honestly, even if Ronnie James Dio wasn't their vocalist, you still hear about the Joe Lynn Turner era. That's where he got his start. And he was a very acclaimed metal vocalist and still is. They contributed so much, and especially the guitar work of Ritchie Blackmore and the drums. of Cozy Powell. You've got two massively significant figures. Richie Blackmore already revolutionized hard rock and heavy metal with Deep Purple. But what he did with Rainbow was bring in something dark and more melodic and more, I don't know, majestic in a way. And of course, during the 80s, they came more commercial, but there was still something of a neoclassical element to it. These guys are legends, and because of the revolution they started and the massive impact they had on heavy metal, I mean, again, it introduced Ronnie James Dio to the world. Without his start in Rainbow, he wouldn't have gotten that legend status. They are at the top of the S tier. Honest to God, they're at the top of the S tier. A lot wouldn't be here today if Rainbow hadn't have happened. Straight up. All right. Next is Revocation. Only reason why I know that logo is because I've had to inspect it so many times it's burned into my brain. All right. Honestly, these guys are getting a straight S. You know why? Revocation, Dave Davidson, revolutionized the way technical death metal sounds. They're highly influential. Again, the Dave Davidson name is constant in the metal community. Known for his guitar playing and his legacy, the band has just soared to new heights and it increased the amount of technicality and just the attention to detail to death metal music. This guy is one of the most revered modern legends of the new decade. Hell, even the new millennium. Their contributions have been widely noted. I mean, these guys are massive here in America. They're massive overseas. They are probably one of the reigning bands of the time, and they are very consistent with groundbreaking records. You always hear about what they're doing. And honestly, I do give credit to Dave Davidson and Revocation for kind of bringing back the sport element to metal guitar playing. You know, in the 80s, you had all those shrapnel guys. You had Vinnie Moore. You had Tony McAlpine. You had, of course, you also had Jason Becker and Marty Friedman. You also had, Greg Howe, Joe Stump, Gary Hoey. All those guys. That was like sport playing. Richie Kotzen. So these guys were just shredaholics. Steve Vai, Joe Satch. And what he's doing is kind of modern version of what all these great names that I just mentioned were doing back in the 80s. And since he has kind of repopularized, you know, the guitar solo and the really intricate guitar work into modern metal, a lot of the contemporaries have stepped up their game as far as technical prowess and what they can do. Everybody's trying to step up their game. It's like sport. We haven't seen so much sport in metal guitar playing in a long time. It's kind of refreshing, but also at the same time, when you listen to all the notes and the sweeping and everything else these guys do, it kind of just sounds like, hey, I'm jerking off my guitar. I can really play. But a lot of it lacks soul. Dave's work, on the other hand, is just really original. Now, he does mind-blowing stuff, but it sounds incredibly musical, and I think he kicked metal's, really, he gave metal the kick in the ass it needed to get real guitar playing to come back. So, Revocation deserves an S-tier ranking. All right. Riot City. This is also kind of a band that shares pretty much an identical fate to, what was that band we just put here? Blasphemy. No, not Blasphemy. Crypt Sermon. Again, Canadian band. These guys are super small. But from my understanding, these guys are trying to be the new wave of old school heavy metal music, taking influence from the guys that I really love, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, stuff like that. And they're trying to put a new spin on old metal. And they are popular in small circles, but they're very underground. Not many people know about them. I don't even know if they've even left Canada on tour or not. These guys are just getting started. They do have like 3 or 4 releases under their belt, but nobody has heard about it. So these guys are getting an F just because there's no support. And honestly, in this day and age, a lot of those new old school bands don't get love because it's old. I don't get that. Good music is good music no matter what time period you're coming out of. And honestly, to find a young band that really loves the old metal, the melodic metal, You know, I feel like they need to be higher up on the list because I feel like in the midst of everything that's raining, we need something different. We do need music that sounds like, without plagiarizing, by the way, because that's worse. We need more music that shows that there is still love and then there's an audience for old metal and that kids can still, you know, younger people can still play music like this and be respected and put their own spin on things and be completely original. I feel like we need more of it. But then again, I'm an old school fool. I'd probably love these guys. In fact, I need to check them out. But unfortunately, due to their lack of significance and support, they get an F. I hope in time these guys get the attention and they need and get a good record label and can become relevant, because I feel like the world needs something different. And I feel like somebody that can pay homage in an original way to the old metal of the 80s, I'd love to see that happen again. It would really do well to reopen people's eyes to the bands of the past and create a new legacy and further immortalize what made metal great to begin with, before all these 1,500 subgenres. No disrespect, but sometimes less is more. And I would love for a band not just to be considered a throwback band or a copycat band, to kind of put a fresh spin on things. I would love to see that. All right, Rivers of Nile. I just researched these guys. I think I'm going through a brain fart. Okay. I believe Rivers of Nile are an American deathcore band. These guys, honestly, I don't know if they're still active or not. They might be. They might just be really small. Again, I just researched all these guys like an hour and a half to 2 hours ago. My memory's terrible. That being said, what I do know is they're not largely significant, even though you do hear about them a lot. When you take a look at consistency within the band, also, they weren't really revolutionary. They're another one of those consistent bands that just release, consistently decent music. I don't really hear much bad about them, honestly. It's just that they're really not making a lot of waves. So for that reason alone, lack of consistency, lack of availability, and honestly, just lack of being revolutionary. These guys just kind of are an F tier. I don't feel like they gained enough notoriety to be anything really, anything less, to be anything rather greater than an F. Again, you hear about them, but the circles are small. There's not a lot of influence. There's not a lot of listeners, honestly. When you go to their Spotify and Last FM, that's the one thing that I noticed. For a band that you do hear about a bit, there's really not a lot of people showing up for them. And that is concerning. I mean, they do have some releases under their belt, but it just doesn't seem that they're really getting anywhere, and they're kind of niche. Samael, Lucifer. No context. Don't know anything about him. Sargeist. That's another German AF band name. Don't know anything about him. God, I hate these logos. I really hate these logos. Signs of the Swarm. They're swarming straight into no context. And look at how this no context category is blooming. I really need an education, y'all. All right, Sirenia. That is doom metal from Norway. You do hear about them in, certain circles. Honestly, they do get really decent reviews from critics and fans alike. They seem to be fairly available and accessible. It looks, from the looks of things, they're a more modern band, and it seems like they're a band on the rise. They're becoming more noted. You hear about them more. I feel like in time, they're going to be a really huge band. That being said, they're one of the hardest working bands out of Norway. They're slowly, what I'm seeing is, because I've heard about these guys for a little while, at least for the past year or so, a year or two. And it seems like they're becoming more present. So I feel like over time, these guys are really going, and they're female fronted, by the way. Did you know that? That's also unique too. Female fronted Norwegian doom metal. I think there's a lot of symphonic elements and some other stuff going on with them. And I also believe they do male, like, death metal vocals also. So they're very versatile. They've got a lot going on. They're becoming extremely popular. They're becoming very hard to avoid, to be honest with you. And they do get a lot of listens on their Spotify and their Last FM. Are they super revolutionary? Not yet. But I think once they get a consistent and stronger hold on their audience and become more relevant, they very well could be. So these guys are definitely a band to watch. Overall, these guys seem to have just generally positive reviews. That's awesome. Skullfist! Okay, I've known this band for a long time. Not personally. I did talk to them once or twice on MySpace. Yes, I'm showing my age. These guys are a very traditional heavy metal band. Really great choruses, really great guitar work. These guys have been around for quite a while. Unfortunately, these guys have a big case of local significance. You never really hear about them much in America. They have went to Wacken, which is huge. Wacken Open Air Festival. I think these guys are incredibly talented, but I just don't think they're getting their due. Just looking at their tour roster, their dates outside of Canada are very small. So I feel like that kind of speaks volumes to what they're doing. And with as many releases and as much music as they put out, they should have been somewhere more significantly by now. I feel like it's a shame that more people don't know about them. But that being said, these guys fall into that terrible F category. I don't feel like they're deserving of an F, but nobody ever gave them love. When I first discovered them, like, what year is it? 2024? When I discovered them, like, 19 years ago, maybe more than that, it was like 2010. 14 years ago. Whoops, I can't count. When I first discovered them around 2009, 2010, these guys, I thought they were on the verge of a revolution. You fast forward 14 years. 14 years! And they're pretty much in the same place. That's disappointing. Because if you guys have actually listened to Skullfist, they should be on top of the world. There's nobody that sounds like them. They're awesome. A very disappointing and hurtful F because, again, these guys are just... I hate it. These guys are awesome. I've never heard of So In. Soulfly. Max Cavalera is back again. This is his current band. I mean, he also has the Cavalera Conspiracy too. But this is his second most popular venture in music. Soulfly is his post-Sepultura band. Apparently, he started planning and writing for his next venture into the music business right after his exit from Sepultura. He is still currently kind of living under his shadow from Sepultura. I mean, there's no way he can't, but I feel like out of all the artists that are currently trying to be different and do something more than they were in their original band, I feel like Max Cavalera has probably done by far the best job of that than anybody else. I mean, yes, there are people still hollering for a Cavalera reunion, exiting of Derek Green and all that good stuff. I don't think it's ever going to happen, y'all. Not with disrespect, but he's created another legacy for himself, and I feel like he's very happy with that. And also, these guys are massively significant and relevant. The style is quite different than Sepultura. These guys are massively influential. And honestly, it kind of comes back to like a Manowar thing from, I think, the first or second video. It's a very much like... Soulfly is very much a religious experience to their fans. Max is just absolutely a mastermind and a musical genius. Their fans are called The Tribe. And these guys, when you hear Soulfly fans talk about the experience, when you hear Soulfly talk about the experience, it is something that's on another plane. Max is immortalized. I don't think in the metal community he can really do much wrong. And it seems like in time, the man works really hard. He works his ass off, honestly. He's become bigger than what he was, honestly. And I feel like his current legacy, while being different, is still significant, important, and groundbreaking. But it's not on the same tier of what he did with Sepultura, factually. But they are right at the top of the A tier because Soulfly is just kind of honestly a tour de force. It's something to be reckoned with. He's created something massively revolutionary and legendary just by doing something that he believes in. And the fans believe in it that much. That elevates the status. Max is just one of a kind, and his music is honestly legendary. It speaks for itself. Alright, what is the next band? Thy Catafalque? What the fuck? See what I did there? No, don't censor me. That wasn't a curse word. Alright. This is very French sounding and very no context sounding for me. Alright, Twilight Force. This is an easy F. These guys, no hate, no disrespect. It's just the facts. This is like the cheesiest of the cheese when it comes to power metal. These guys wear live action role playing LARP outfits while playing power metal, and they do have a cult following, but I don't think anybody really takes them seriously. I'm not saying that from my personal opinion. It just seems like they're fun to be around. They make fun music. There's nothing wrong with that. They're not revolutionary. They're here for a good time. And now look up Christian Eriksen, I believe his name is. He has a striking resemblance to Thor from the Marvel movies. He does kind of look like Chris Hemsworth. Just saying. He does look like a superhero, so I kind of get it. Twilight Force is an F. I feel like these guys are a lot of fun. I don't think they were meant to be revolutionary. I just think they're here to make people feel good and make good music, and there's nothing wrong with that. Whew. Unearth. These guys are getting a D tier rating. This might make some people mad. They are probably one of the OGs for metalcore. Did they create the movement? No. About 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that, probably like 8 years ago. 12 years ago, I'm terrible at math if you can't tell. 12 years ago, these guys were like on top of the world. They were everywhere. You couldn't avoid them. They're on fronts of magazines, guitar playing magazines, metal magazines, on freaking music choice channels on cable and XM radio. And it seems like as of late, everything about Unearth has died. There's people are still asking if they're a band. They are, and they just recently replaced Ken Susi, which was their longtime guitar player. I guess it just wasn't working anymore. That being said, their body of work is very available and accessible. Were they revolutionary? No. But from a band that was actually like up here on the popular vote, for them to have died off in such a short period of time and go to relative obscurity, it's not good. Are they relevant? Yes, of course they are. They're nowhere near the Titans they were, but I feel like these guys are very consistent, and judging from what I found out today, they are, as far as the kind of music they release, as far as their style and what the fans think of the music and the albums they put out. They're respected. They're very respected by the metal community. Is it anything super special? Not really. A very tough, but a very deserved deteriorating. Their body of work is available, but I feel like as turmoil happens and things change over the years, lack of consistency really killed their audience. I feel like there's still a lot of people out there for them, but I don't think it's anywhere near they were, and I don't know if they're going to get that back. Alright guys, that's it for part 4 of the Ultimate Tiermaker Challenge. Again, if you guys have any information or anywhere where I could do some really good research on these bands that I don't know, please comment them down, because I would really like to have a final form of this list where everybody gets charted according to where they belong. That being said, I feel like we covered a ton of ground today. I feel good about it. I feel like we did this in a really fair and fact-filled way, and I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. And guys, don't forget, there's a tier list for this whole saga. And honestly, I think we're about to the halfway point on this list. It's kind of sad it took 4 videos to get there, but we're getting there. There's a playlist for this whole Tiermaker saga. Please check it out. If you missed this video when it came out, go ahead and click on the playlist and catch up with it. Please let me know what you think of this stuff. Again, I'll see you again next week with another Tiermaker video. Please keep the comments coming. I love you guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. This is your boy Mark, and I'm out of here.